It's Witness Wednesday, and this week, the treasure's been unlocked. What will you witness? Join us and see for yourself.
Shalom Yasharala, Yahweh, Hashem, Yahushua, Brakatham. I'm the Nashai Aslan, and with me, I got the mighty Malak Enoch, and we're going to bring forth Witness Wednesday, number 21, Magic. Now, the reason for me bringing this particular lesson out was I was hearing a conversation about magic, and someone started talking about human ingenuity, and it intrigued me, because I was wondering, what's the depth of magic? What does that look like? And how does human ingenuity have a part to play in magic? And so I wanted to take a look in the scriptures. Now, I was already aware of the Bible condemning magic in the sense of, like, if you're a witch, right, you shall not suffer a witch to live, those with familiar spirits and so forth. So I found it intriguing, and I wanted to go in and look at the scriptures and see places where a form of magic was being done and showing that there was human ingenuity in some parts, and then there's some things that I can't explain happening in others. And so we're going to take a look at a brief overview of Deuteronomy chapter 18 and verse 9 through 12. So with that, let's get right into the presentation. And I want to give all praise and honor to Yahweh, Hashem, Yahushua, Tawadah, for allowing us to bring forth this lesson. All right. Here we have the definition of magic: the power of apparently influencing the course of events by using mysterious or supernatural forces. Now notice it says apparently, the power of apparently influencing. That doesn't mean that it really happened. It just, they were able to deceive the person viewing into believing that's what really happened. They are apparently influencing the course of events by using mysterious or supernatural forces. And so that's why I said sometimes it's human ingenuity, or it could be literally some supernatural forces. And ingenuity, let's get the definition of that: the quality of being clever, original, and inventive. So when you see somebody pull a rabbit out the hat, it's clever. They were able to create a method to make it seem like they really pulled a rabbit out of a hat, out of thin air. But there is, if you guys ever watched, there was a show, the guy wore a black mask. It was popular on TV, and he would literally show the workings behind all of these magic tricks. And it always came down to human ingenuity. It looked like one thing happened, but really behind the scenes, there was a whole lot of different stuff behind the scenes that you couldn't see with the naked eye to know that that was what was going on. So they used ingenuity. They were being clever and influencing the course of the events through their cleverness and inventiveness. So we're going to go to the book of Deuteronomy and look at some titles that use magic.
Deuteronomy chapter 18 verse 9. When thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. Verse 10. There shall not be found among you any one that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch.
So we can see here there's some titles in here, and these people are utilizing magic to a degree. I didn't highlight anyone making their son or daughter pass through the fire. That one was, you literally, like Moloch, they would literally sacrifice their children to that god and put them into a pretty much a furnace and offer their child up to that deity. So that was for that, but I didn't want to go into that one. Rather, we'll be starting at divination, and there's even more. So I gotta get the rest. But we see here divination, observer of times, enchanter, or a witch. And so we're gonna be going into these, and note that the Most High said, "Thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations." So we're not supposed to be learning these things, practicing these things, teaching them to our children, inviting them into our home. These things are not supposed to be practiced by us. They are abominations, and we have to be aware of what they are. And I'm going to try and give it to you on a very small scale, but it goes even deeper than what I'm going to put forth today.
Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 11, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. Verse 12, for all that do these things are an abomination unto the Lord. And because of these abominations, the Lord thy God doth drive them out from before thee.
So we see we have charmers, consulters with familiar spirits, wizard, necromancer. So we have a list of titles that are slightly different in senses, but a lot of times they are one and the same. They're all practicing some form of enchantment, some form of magic, some form of wickedness, to put it very plain, because the Most High calls these things abominations. And so there are people, even to this day, of course, that are practicing these things still. Well, we're going to get each one and just look a bit about each particular title. And we'll start with divination. So divination is the practice of seeking knowledge of the future or the unknown by supernatural means. We call them today fortune tellers. All of us have seen the psychics, the mediums. You'll be driving by and there'll be a little house on the corner and it says psychic reading, fortune teller. Divination is still being practiced this day. A lot of times you'll see them using tarot cards, trying to read your future, trying to read your palm, read your forehead, all these different things. So we can relate to this. Go ahead. And we have an account of someone being a fortune teller in the book of Acts.
Right. Acts chapter 16, verse 16. And it came to pass, as we went to prayer, a certain damsel possessed with a spirit of divination met us, which brought her masters much gain by soothsaying.
So when you see someone being a psychic or a medium or a fortune teller, it says this lady was possessed with a spirit of divination. That's not a righteous spirit, because the Most High called anyone practicing these things an abomination. So she was possessed. She brought her masters great gain, this woman, by her fortune telling and by soothsaying. Now I put the definition of soothsayer at the bottom. One who pretends to prognosticate future events. It basically means to prophesy future events. That's the definition of a soothsayer. She was pretending, she was good at it. She was basically a actor to a degree. She was acting and putting on a show and pretending to prophesy people's futures. Now I'll read this, but you could read the scripture at the very end. Observer of times, someone who practices divination, astrology, or fortune telling, interpreting omens, celestial signs, or specific days, seasons to predict the future, seen as contrary to faith in God's sovereignty. It refers to someone who claims special insight into future events by reading signs like the weather, stars, or lucky, unlucky days. A zodiac sign is one of the 12 symbolic divisions of the sky used in astrology, representing segments of the ecliptic, the sun's path, that correspond to personality traits, emotions, and life patterns based on a person's birth date, with each sign linked to specific elements: fire, earth, air, water, and constellations influencing astrological interpretations. So you can see here in Observer of Times, and that's why I said a lot of them are related, because it says divination, it says fortune telling, but it also says other things: celestial signs, interpreting omens, astrology. So we already went into divination and fortune telling. For this particular one, the observer of times is we're going to be looking at the celestial signs astrology, and that's why I brought forth the zodiac sign, because that was one of the most popular things I could think of today that people are really hooked on and really base their life around. If the zodiac sign says today is going to be a bad day, then they let that be true and they have a bad day. If the zodiac sign says that they're not compatible with this other sign, then they won't even have a relationship with that other person because the zodiac sign said so. So that's being superstitious, and that's also talked about in the New Testament. Being superstitious is not a good thing. So let's get Deuteronomy.
Come on, Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 19. Unless thou lift up thine eyes unto heaven, and when thou seest the sun and the moon and the stars, even all the hosts of heaven, shouldest be driven to worship them and serve them, which the Lord thy God hath divided unto all nations under the whole heaven.
Right. People that are observer of times, they worship, they give praise, they give power, glory, and honor to the signs, such as the stars in heaven, such as the moon, such as the sun, and they start to worship them and serve them and give credit to them, when ultimately the Most High was the one that made them. There's a greater power, and that's the Most High. So you can't be out here serving these things that were created by the Most High. And so this is what the observer of times commit to.
Enchanter, a person who uses magic or sorcery, especially to put someone or something under a spell. Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 11. Surely the serpent will bite without enchantment, and a babbler is no better.
So a movie I just watched recently, it was called Weapons, and there's a witch in there, and that witch uses enchantments. She's also an enchanter. She was using magic or sorcery to put people under spells. She had this thorn branch. It had thorns on it, and she would cut her hand, and she would get the blood, smear it all over the branch. She would tie up someone's hair around the branch, and then if she snapped it, the person would go crazy, and whoever she put the hair around that branch, when she snapped it, that person that she had under control would go and attack and to unalive the person that she wrapped the hair around the branch. So she was putting them under spells. She was using magic, sorcery. That's some real black magic right there. And she was an enchanter. She was putting people under spells. Another enchantment could be a harlot. Her path leads to destruction, but she entices and seduces with her words. Words can also be spells. So she's seducing and leading that fool to his destruction with her words. So those could also be enchanting spells. Ecclesiastes 10 and 11, surely the serpent will bite without enchantment. So it's saying it doesn't need to be under a spell to do its job. The serpent is going to bite. So it's letting you know that enchantment is a spell, and it's telling you that the serpent is going to do its job. It doesn't need the enchantment. It doesn't need to be under a spell to do what it normally does. I brought that, but this is going to tie in together with the next one.
Charmer, one that charms or has power to charm, one that uses or has the power of enchantment. Snake charmer, Sirach chapter 12, verse 13. Who will pity a charmer that is bitten with a serpent, or any such as come nigh wild beasts?
Right. So you have enchantment, people putting spells on people, and then you have charmer, one that charms, charismatic, or has power to charm, seducing, persuading. Now, there's a good persuasion, there's a bad persuasion, because we're called to persuade people to this truth. But then there's people persuading you to do evil. One that uses or has the power of enchantment. So they're casting spells. They are very influential. Influence could be on the right-hand side or it could be on the left-hand side. There's very influential people that are on the left-hand side, and there's very influential people that are on the right-hand side. Right? So there's a good and a bad, good and evil. Now, one thing that came to mind with a charmer that I could think of right off the top of my head was a snake charmer. Sirach 12 and 13 says, who will pity a charmer that is bitten with a serpent. Who's gonna pity that man? You ever seen the guys with they play this like flute or something like that, and they go back and forth, and then you see the big cobra, and it stands up and it starts swaying side to side. A snake charmer, and he is putting on a show for the people to watch and show that he can charm this cobra, and it will look like it's dancing with him. And now, from what I've seen, it wasn't the music that caused the snake to do that, but rather they usually use a pretty large instrument, and so the cobra thinks that it's a larger animal than itself, and its natural instincts is like a defensive mechanism within the cobra that causes it to sway back and forth. So that's just something I seen. You guys can look it up. There's a bunch of videos on it. But those are snake charmers. And who will pity him when he is bitten by the serpent? Another thing you could think of is the people that pet the alligators and put their arms in there and do all that crazy stuff. Who's gonna pity that charmer? He's putting on a show. He's charming until that alligator clamps down on his arm, and it's like, well, what did you expect to happen?
Which a person thought to have magic powers, especially evil ones, popularly depicted as a woman wearing a black cloak and pointed hat and flying on a broomstick. Exodus chapter 22 verse 18. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live.
Con. So, as I was talking about in that movie, her name was Gladys. She was an enchanter. She was a witch. She had magic powers. Now, she had to do certain spells and rituals to get it done, but nevertheless, she had evil powers, evil magic powers. Now, she wasn't wearing no black cloak or pointed hat or flying on no broomstick. No, she did have bright orange hair, though, which was very creepy. Anyway, in the scripture Exodus 22 and 18, it says, "You shall not suffer a witch to live." There is no tolerance. It is condemned. A witch cannot live. There are a lot of celebrities that practice witchcraft. Sometimes they're open about it, and a lot of times they are hiding it behind closed doors, and you would never even know. If you watch a lot of these performances nowadays, they will be very open about the witchcraft that they practice, and actually you are in the midst of a ritual when you're there attending that performance.
Wizard, a man who has magical powers. Leviticus chapter 20 verse 27. A man also or woman that hath a familiar spirit, or that is a wizard, shall surely be put to death. They shall stone them with stones. Their blood shall be upon them.
So we see magic is not good. It is condemned. You have a familiar spirit. If you're a wizard, if you're a witch, you're supposed to be put to death. You're supposed to be stoned with stones. A wizard is just a male version. When you hear witch, that's a woman. When you hear a wizard, or they're also known as a warlock. They're ones that use evil magic. So it is condemned in the scriptures for anyone to practice such abominations.
Consulter, with familiar spirits, the spirit of a dead person, invoked by a medium to advise or prophecy. 1 Samuel chapter 28 verse 6. And when Saul inquired of the Lord answered him not, neither by dreams, nor by Urim, nor by prophets. Verse 7. Then said Saul unto his servants, Seek me a woman that hath a familiar spirit, that I may go to her and inquire of her. And his servant said to him, Behold, there is a woman that hath a familiar spirit.
Okay. Yeah, she had a familiar spirit at Endor. They call her the Witch of Endor. So we can see here, consulter with familiar spirits. Now, if you go look up familiar, type it in on Google, and you'll see that the definition is a demon, someone that consults with demons. So it's interesting because we say, oh, that seems familiar to me, but we don't even know. Now, it does have another definition, of course, but the main one that popped up, the very first, was a demon. So it was very interesting. The spirit of a dead person invoked by a medium to advise or prophecy. See, so you have a person who is acting as a medium, we call them mediums, psychics, who is invoking the spirit of a dead person Now, this was actually done by the witch of Endor. See, we had righteous ways of going about certain things that these evil people are trying to achieve. Give you an example in verse 6. Saul inquired of the Lord answered him not. So he prayed, the Lord didn't answer. Neither by dreams, nor by Urim, which is Urim and Thummim, nor by prophets. So we have prayers that we can speak to the Most High. We can get dreams from the Most High. Urim and Thummim was what a high priest had, and those would give you the answer to the way that you should go. So if whether you should do it or not do it, it would give you answers. And then by prophets, so the prophets would teach. So we had ways of being able to tell the future or of decisions that should be made. But these consulters with familiar spirits, these enchanters, these charmers, wizards, witches, consulters with familiar spirits, they are going about it in the wrong manner, and they're using evil magic to try and get similar results. So they went to go seek the witch of Endor. Right? She has a familiar spirit, and Saul wants to inquire of her. So let's see how this story plays out.
Necromancer, conjuration of the spirits of the dead for purposes of magically revealing the future or influencing the course of events. It sounds like a fortune teller. 1 Samuel chapter 28 verse 11. Then said the woman, whom shall I bring up unto thee? And he said, bring me up Samuel.
So at first, you see, it's one and the same. A consulter with familiar spirits is the same, in a sense, as a necromancer. She's conjuring the spirits of the dead for purposes of magically revealing the future or influencing the course of events. And we see that was almost the definition of magic. And she even asked him, who shall I bring up? He says Samuel. Samuel's dead at this point. So she's going to bring up Samuel from the dead. Go ahead, verse 12.
Verse 12. And when the woman saw Samuel, she cried with a loud voice. And the woman spake to Saul, saying, why hast thou deceived me? For thou art Saul. Verse 13. And the king said unto her, be not afraid, for what sawest thou? And the woman said unto Saul, I saw gods ascending out of the earth. Verse 14. And he said unto her, what form is he of? And she said, an old man cometh up, and he is covered with a mantle. And Saul perceived that it was Samuel, and he stooped with his face to the ground and bowed himself.
So the witch of Endor was able to actually bring Samuel from the dead, his spirit, and present him before Saul. And now Saul is bowing himself to Samuel, even though Samuel is dead. So she is a necromancer. She is a consulter with familiar spirits. Go ahead, verse 15.
Verse 15. And Samuel said to Saul, why hast thou disquieted me to bring me up? And Saul answered, I am sore distressed, for the Philistines make war against me, and God is departed from me, and answereth me no more, neither by prophets, nor by dreams. Therefore I have called thee, that thou mayst make known unto me what I shall do.
So Saul no longer had favor from the Most High because of his disobedience. And so now he's turning to the person that he feels could help him. Even though Samuel was dead, there was a medium that was able to, a witch, a necromancer. You see how all these things tie in together. And this witch of Endor was able to actually bring forth Samuel. And if you continue reading on, Samuel rebukes Saul and lets him know that the kingdom will be taken from him and given to David. Now, I want to end it on a good note, showing that the servants and the mighty men of the Most High have always and will always be better than any magician, than any astrologer, than any consulter with familiar spirits, than any of them, any witch, wizard, etc. We will always be the elite.
Genesis chapter 41 verse 8. And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt, and all the wise men thereof, And Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could enter them unto Pharaoh.
So none can interpret the dream of Pharaoh. Guess who was able to actually interpret that dream? Joseph was able to interpret the dream. Nobody else. A child of Israel. Now let's get another account.
Exodus chapter 7 verse 8. And the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, verse 9, when Pharaoh shall speak unto you, saying, shew a miracle for you, then thou shalt say unto Aaron, take thy rod, and cast it before Pharaoh, and it shall become a serpent.
So we see a miracle performed here when Aaron takes his rod and casts it before Pharaoh, and it becomes a serpent. That's a miracle. That's not magic. That's a miracle because it's done righteously. It's divine. It's not divination, it's divine. And so this was a miracle performed, but watch how the Egyptians respond.
Exodus chapter 7 verse 10. And Moses and Aaron went in unto Pharaoh, and they did so as the Lord had commanded. And Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. Verse 11. And Pharaoh also called the wise men and the sorcerers, now the magicians of Egypt. They also did in like manner with their enchantments. Verse 12. For they cast down every man his rod, and they became serpents, but Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods.
So Pharaoh wanted the magicians to show that they could perform the same quote unquote miracle, but they could not. What they could do though is use enchantments. So it looked like they performed the same thing. That's what I was talking about in the beginning of this class. Ingenuity, human ingenuity. That's what was done here. It looked like they performed the same thing, the magicians, right? By casting their rods down and they became serpents. This happened, but not in the same manner as when Aaron cast his down. And to prove that, it says, but Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods. It was no match. It was not divine. It was human ingenuity. It was an enchantment. It was something that looked like the real thing, but it wasn't. It was false. And let's get our last account.
Daniel chapter 1 verse 19. And the king communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king. Verse 20. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm.
So this is a final account to show that the children of Israel have always been able to outperform the magicians, astrologers, the wise men of their times, because for one sole reason is that the Most High was dealing with these men. So we don't need to turn to evil magic and sorcery and witchcraft. That's an abomination to us. Let it be far from us. What we have is something so much greater. We have the Most High performing miracles. And we didn't even touch on all the miracles that Christ did himself. I just gave some accounts showing in the past that our forefathers were on another level than all the rest. And that's because we didn't lean to our own understanding and start performing all these evil works. No, the ones that were set above were the ones that were obedient to the Most High, and the power came from the Most High. And so with that, family, keep yourself from idols, keep yourself from magic, keep yourself from anything that would cause you to commit an abomination. Stay on that straight and narrow path. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was eye-opening. I thank you all very much for watching another Witness Wednesday. And with that, we're going to bid you a mighty Yahweh, Ba'Shem, Yahushua, Rakatam. Shalom.
Shalom.